The war was older than anyone fighting it. It had burned across 1,000 systems, shattered empires, and rewritten history so many times that no one remembered what the first page had even said. It was just war now, an inevitability, the universe's background noise, and today in the cold black graveyard of a forgotten battlefield, it was about to get louder. Captain Eli Monroe adjusted the straps of his command harness as his Keshthal, battlecruiser Windchaser, accelerated through the debris field. The ship groaned, her hull plating scraping against the twisted wreckage of ancient warships, some older than the war itself. Outside, the void was thick with drifting bones of the past. Ships cracked open like empty shells, their crews long since turned to dust. Eli's tactical display pulsed red. The Dominion fleet had arrived. "This is Monroe to all wings," he said, voice calm despite the static-laced urgency of his bridge crew. "We've got about 5 minutes before the Dominion's vanguard turns us into scrap. Everyone keep it tight and remember," a voice cut in. Yeah, don't die. Keep flying, don't do anything stupid." Eli exhaled through his nose. "Zeke." Lieutenant Zeke Wildcard Harrison, reckless, absurdly talented, and one bad decision away from making a permanent smear in the cosmos, chuckled over the comms. "Hey, I'm just saving you the trouble of repeating yourself, boss." The battlecruiser rumbled as the first Dominion salvo rippled through the battlefield, a distant flash of blue fire lighting up the wreckage-strewn void. The Keshthal fleet answered in kind, lances of plasma and kinetic slugs carving burning trails through the abyss. Eli turned to his second-in-command, Danny Brooks, as she studied a chaotic stream of diagnostic data. She had a grease-streaked face, wild curls pulled into a haphazard bun, and the kind of genius that made her both indispensable and deeply concerning. "We're outgunned," she said, tapping furiously at a holo display. "Just in case that wasn't obvious." It was. But did you know how much? She pulled up a schematic of their battered fleet. "They've got twice our firepower, 3 times the ships, and, oh, look at that, a planet-cracker cannon." Eli's jaw tensed. The Dominion's secret weapon, unveiled 2 weeks ago. It had already wiped out 3 Keshthal colonies, turning cities into glowing wastelands, before anyone had a chance to surrender. And now it was here. "This was supposed to be a minor skirmish," Eli muttered. Danny snorted. "That's what. The last 100 battles were supposed to be, too." Luther Kane, the quietest and deadliest member of their crew, spoke up from the shadows of the bridge. "If they fire that cannon, we won't have time to regret being here." Eli barely glanced at him. Kane had once been Dominion, a high-ranking officer before he defected. No one knew why. No one asked. "So," Zeke cut in, "any last-minute, wildly irresponsible plans?" Danny grinned. "As a matter of fact, I was just about to rig a partially destroyed alien reactor from a derelict battleship to overload and cause an electromagnetic cascade failure in the Dominion's formation." A pause. Eli sighed. "Is that a thing?" "I have no idea," she said cheerfully, grabbing her toolkit. "But we're about to find out." A sleeping giant minutes. Later, Danny suited up and launched herself into the void, her thrusters flaring as she maneuvered through the wreckage. Eli monitored her vitals from the bridge, heart hammering despite himself. The Dominion fleet was closing in, their planet-cracker cannon beginning its charge cycle. If this stunt didn't work, they'd be vaporized before they could say, "Oops." Danny landed on the derelict ship's hull, an ancient, forgotten warship half buried under centuries of wreckage. It wasn't Dominion. It wasn't Keshthal. It was something older. She found a breach in the hull and slipped inside. Darkness swallowed her. The ship was dead silent, but something about it felt wrong. The air was stale but present. Gravity, weaker than standard but functional, and the systems, though dark, weren't dead. Danny murmured, her visor casting a faint blue glow over rusted walls and ancient consoles. "So, slight development. I don't think this ship is as dead as we thought," Eli frowned. "Explain." "I mean," she muttered, brushing dust off an alien interface, "it's like someone just turned off the lights and left. This isn't a ruin. It's a sleeping ship." She pulled open a panel, fingers dancing over unrecognizable tech. A pulse of strange blue light flickered through the circuits, The hair on her arms stood on end. Then, a deep, mechanical vibration rolled through the ship's frame. Lights flared, to life in cascading waves, illuminating miles of corridors. Displays blinked on, running alien script that shifted and translated before her eyes. Her stomach dropped. "Oh, shit. What?" Eli demanded. Danny swallowed. "I think I just turned something on. The awakening." The entire wreckage field trembled. Dozens, hundreds of massive ships powered up at once, their dormant systems roaring back to life. Glowing engines, weapons coming online, shields flickering into existence. Ships that had been nothing more than hollowed-out corpses for centuries now looked pristine, as if time itself had been undone. The Dominion fleet halted mid-charge. Their commanders, who had spent their entire lives studying war, had no historical record of these ships because they weren't just alien relics. They were human, and they were very much awake. Danny had made a mistake. A big one. The ship beneath her boots was no longer a lifeless wreck. It was awake, humming with power, and judging by the way the entire damn fleet around it had just come online, she hadn't just flipped a switch. She'd set off an avalanche. Eli," she said, voice tight. "So, hypothetically, what would you do if you accidentally woke up a fleet of ships that shouldn't exist?" A beat of silence. Then Eli, ever the professional, replied, "Danny." "Yeah, run," she agreed. Thrusters flaring, she launched herself off the reactivated battleship, twisting through the debris field as light, real, burning, ship-powered light, blazed to life across the fleet. Dead metal no longer floated aimlessly. It was moving, and not just moving, aligning. The fleet stirs from the bridge of the Windchaser. Eli Monroe stood frozen, watching the impossible unfold. The Dominion had stopped firing. The Keshathal had stopped firing. Everyone had stopped firing, because this wasn't a battle anymore. This was something else. "Danny," he said, eyes locked on the hollow display, which now showed hundreds of enormous warships shifting into formation. "Tell me you didn't just wake up a precursor fleet." Danny's voice crackled back over comms. "If I say no, will it make you feel better?" "No." "Then yeah, I totally did that." Eli felt his pulse hammering. These ships, massive dreadnoughts, sleek interceptors, carriers that made even the Dominion's warships look small, were not Kesh-Thal. They weren't Dominion. They weren't any species known to exist. But they were broadcasting. A single pulse of data shot through the system, overriding every comm channel, every sensor, every ship's interface. It was an ident code, a name, a designation. UHS Vengeance-class fleet. Battle group Omega status. Dormant mode. Disengaged. Orders. Awaiting command. Input Ellie felt a chill crawl up his spine. The UHS United Human Systems, the old human empire. The Kyo, one that had disappeared thousands of years ago, long before any Dominion records even existed. And it wasn't just one ship. It was an entire war fleet. Admiral Jack Vance, the bridge of the largest dreadnought, a man woke up. Admiral Jack Vance blinked against the light of his reactivating command deck, confusion and instinct battling for control. His uniform, crisp despite the ages, bore the insignia of a nation that no longer existed. Alarms whispered to life. His crew, officers, gunners, engineers, stirred in their cryopods, groggy but alive. The ship's AI flickered into his earpiece. "Admiral, systems are online. We have been dormant for error, data corruption detected." Vance exhaled sharply, standing as the full weight of his situation settled over him. They had been in stasis. Long-term emergency preserved, held in cryo while the ships remained hidden in the wreckage of some long-forgotten battle. And now, they were awake. "Get me a tactical read," he ordered, voice steady. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah, Kincaid, swiped a hand across the air, pulling up a holographic display. It showed two fleets, one a ragged patchwork of alien warships, the other sleek, orderly uniform. The first looked like scavengers fighting for survival. The second, Dominion warships, big ones. She hesitated. "Sir, I don't recognize any of these ships." Vance stared at the Dominion fleet, watching as their formation wavered. hesitating like a predator, realizing it had picked the wrong prey. "How long have we been under?" he asked. The ship's AI finally processed the corrupted data, then responded. Estimated time elapsed, 12,438 years. Silence. Kincaid turned, expression unreadable. "Sir," she said, "I don't think the war we were fighting exists anymore." Vance let out a slow breath. "Then what the hell is this?" Dominion panic. The Dominion fleet was losing its mind. Eli watched from his command deck as the planet cracker cannon, the weapon that had been poised to wipe them from existence minutes. Hargo powered down. The Dominion flagship was broadcasting across all channels. A voice, cold, mechanical, but with a very real edge of fear, filtered through. "Unknown fleet. Identify immediately." A pause. Then, for the first time in 12,000 years, the human fleet answered. A single transmission. Simple. Clear. Admiral Jack Vance's voice. Calm. Collected. With the kind of weight that didn't ask for authority but assumed it. Cut through the system. "This is Admiral Vance of the United Human Systems. Dominion Fleet, you are in violation of restricted space. Power down your weapons immediately, or we will respond accordingly." The entire battlefield froze. The Dominion, an empire that had crushed entire civilizations, sat on the precipice of a decision that could define the next 1,000 years. Eli held his breath. The Dominion responded. "You are presumed extinct." A pause. Then, low, amused, almost bored, Vance replied, "Surprise." The Dominion commander was taking too long to respond. From the bridge of the UHS Dreadnought, Admiral Jack Vance stood with arms crossed, expression unreadable as he stared. Down an empire that hadn't existed the last time he was awake. He had already figured out the broad strokes of the situation. They had been in cryo for over 12,000 years. Humanity was gone, or at least not in control anymore. The galaxy had moved on. A new empire, this Dominion, was running the show now. The Dominion was armed with what they thought was the biggest gun in the room. Unfortunately for them, Vance had just walked in with the entire armory. The Dominion fleet wasn't attacking. Yet. But Vance could see it. The hesitation, the frantic calculations happening behind the cold, militarized exterior of their ships. They had no idea what they were looking at. That was a powerful thing. And Vance, a seasoned admiral from a war that no longer existed, knew exactly how to use it. The standoff aboard, the wind chaser. Eli Monroe exhaled sharply. "Well," he muttered, rubbing a hand down his face, "we're still alive. That's unexpected." Zeke snorted over comms. "I don't know, man. I think the Dominion is trying to decide whether to surrender or wet themselves first." Eli didn't disagree. Across the battlefield, the planet cracker, cannon, the Dominion's trump card, the thing that had doomed them all minutes ago, was still powered down. No sudden tactical maneuvers, no desperate opening salvos. Just silence, because the Dominion had just realized something. They weren't the apex predator anymore. "Sir," Danny's voice cut in from her station, "we're picking up massive fleet-wide comm activity from the Dominion. Internal encryptions. I think they're waiting for orders from High Command." Eli nodded. "Yeah, because they don't know what the hell they're up against." A new voice cut into the comms, smooth, deep, and carrying the kind of weight that only came from someone who had commanded entire wars. "This is Admiral Vance to the Keshthal forces," the voice said. "You're fighting the Dominion, correct?" Eli straightened. His crew snapped to attention like schoolkids suddenly realizing the principal was in the room. Eli keyed the comms. Yeah, that's us." Vance's voice didn't change. "Who's in charge?" Eli glanced around. "I guess that's me." "Good." Vance's tone was still impossibly calm, as if he wasn't casually speaking across 12,000 years. "Then I'll ask once. What do you want?" Eli blinked. What did he want? The question was so simple, but the weight behind it almost crushed him. He'd spent his entire career just trying to survive, outnumbered, outgunned, fighting for a cause that had been bleeding out for centuries. And now suddenly he had a fleet of 12,000-year-old super dreadnoughts asking him what he wanted. Only one answer made sense. "We want the Dominion gone," Eli said, voice firm. "Out of Keshthal space, out of our lives." For the first time, Vance actually sounded amused. That, he said, can be arranged. The threat the Dominion's response came through. Human forces, the Dominion commander said, voice measured, clipped. You have no authority in this war. Stand down immediately or face the consequences. A long silence, then a single low chuckle. Vance didn't mute the line. He wanted the Dominion to hear it. Let me tell you something, Vance said, his voice smooth, conversational, predatory. The last time I was awake, we burned fleets twice your size to glass before breakfast. Your planet, Cracker? Cute. We used to build those in our spare time. Eli had to admit that was almost certainly a bluff. Didn't matter. The Dominion didn't know that. We had a doctrine back in my day, Vance continued. We called it preemptive overkill. Means we don't start fights, but we sure as hell finish them. Now, I've been asleep for 12 millennia, so I'll ask real nicely. Do you really want to be the first ones to piss me off after I wake up? Silence. Eli felt something shift in the air. The Dominion commander, whoever they were, had just realized they were in checkmate, and then the Dominion fleet started pulling back. The retreat, it wasn't a full retreat. Not yet, but it was a test, a slow, careful withdrawal, waiting to see if the ancient human fleet would react. They didn't, because they didn't have to. The message had already been sent. We're here, we're awake, and we are not impressed. The Dominion didn't turn tail and run. Not yet. That wasn't their way. But the Planet Cracker cannon stayed offline. Their formation was defensive, hesitant. They were recalculating everything. And for the first time since the war had begun, Eli felt something like hope. He turned toward the view screen, watching as the battlefield shifted from an execution to a negotiation. Vance exhaled, then muttered, just barely loud enough to be heard. Same galaxy, same idiots. Eli grinned. You'll fit right in. The Dominion had a choice to make. They could fight or they could walk away. Every second that ticked by on the silent battlefield was another second of hesitation. Another second where the unthinkable settled in, the realization that they were not the dominant force in this war anymore, and Admiral Jack Vance, he was fine either way. The human fleet sat in perfect formation, unmoving, not because they weren't ready, but because they didn't need to be. Windchaser, what's their play? Vance asked, voice steady, casual, like he was discussing the weather. Eli Monroe was staring at the Dominion fleet, watching their shifts, the nervous course corrections, the wavering formation. They don't know what to do, Eli muttered. They want to run, but running means admitting they lost. They want to fight, but... He let out a breath. They're scared. Good. Vance smirked. He hadn't even fired a shot. The last move. Then, an incoming transmission. Dominion Commander. Varshan Tech finally breaking his silence. Admiral Vance, he said, his voice controlled but barely. What are your demands? Eli let out a low whistle. Damn. That's the sound of an empire breaking. Vance leaned back slightly, glancing at his officers. Danny, let's get some visuals. A holodisplay flickered to life, and suddenly, they were face to face with the Dominion commander, a tall, broad-shouldered alien with hard-ridged features and cold yellow eyes. Pride and disbelief warred across his face. Vance gave him a friendly smile. Oh, I don't have any demands, he said lightly. I just wanted to see how long it'd take you to fold. Varshan tensed, his hands clenched, his jaw locking. We do not fold. Vance's smile widened. Oh, you're right. Fold was the wrong word. I meant surrender. A ripple of stunned silence washed across the bridge. Eli actually choked on air. The Dominion commander looked ready to explode. You overestimate yourselves, Varshan growled. Your technology is ancient. Your people are gone. You are the remnants of a forgotten war, nothing more. Vance lifted a hand. Buddy, I don't care. Varshan stopped. I really don't, Vance continued. I've been awake for what, an hour? And I can already tell your whole empire is built on fear. You crushed your enemies so hard for so long that nobody even thought to question you. He leaned in slightly. Well, we're questioning you now. Varshan's hands trembled. Because he knew, they all did. The human fleet wasn't just a fleet. It was the shift of power, the moment in history where the Empire's reign cracked down the middle. And Vance, he was just enjoying the view. The final push Ellie exhaled. He didn't think this moment would ever come. The Dominion had controlled his people, his world, for centuries. They had always been the unstoppable force, the unbeatable, the inevitable. But now the great Dominion fleet was hesitating, squirming, trying to find a way out without losing face. Eli had spent his whole life fighting them, running from them, watching his people get pushed deeper and deeper into despair. And then a bunch of cryogenically frozen war veterans rolled out of their space caskets and ended the war in an afternoon. God, he loved humans. Vance was still watching Varshan, still waiting. The Dominion commander's fists clenched and unclenched, his face flickering between rage and cold logic. Then finally, Varshan Tech exhaled. "We will withdraw from Keshthal space." Eli's entire body locked up. He actually looked at Danny like, "Did I hear that right?" Danny was too stunned to respond. Varshan's expression was stone, but Eli knew what this was. This was the end of the war. And Vance? He just nodded. Like this was the most obvious thing in the world. "Good call," Vance said. "I would have done the same." Varshan cut the transmission, and a moment later, the Dominion fleet turned. The aftermath. "They're leaving," Danny whispered. Disbelieving, Eli sat down heavily, his head spinning. The Dominion didn't surrender, they didn't negotiate. They sure as hell didn't back off. And yet, here they were, watching the most powerful empire in the galaxy cut their losses and run. Zeke laughed. A sudden, unrestrained, wild laugh. Holy shit, we won," Danny exhaled sharply. "I think I'm having an existential crisis." Eli just shook his head, watching the Dominion fleet vanish into the void. The war was over, just like that. And standing at the center of it all, Admiral Vance watched it happen like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Eli leaned toward the comms. "So, Admiral," he said. "Now what?" Vance turned, not just toward Eli, but toward the entire bridge, toward the officers and soldiers who had just woken up in a galaxy that hadn't seen them in 12 millennia. Vance smiled. "Well," he said, stretching slightly, "I don't know about you, but I could go for a damn drink." Eli barked out a laugh. "I know a place." "Good," Vance said, already heading for the doors. "And after that?" His grin turned sharp. "We find out what else needs fixing." And just like that, the galaxy changed forever.